They said I didn't belong at their table. Funny, I built the damn table. That's what I told myself the day I looked out over Boston from the top floor of the Russo Montgomery building, the tower that bore my name, yet never quite felt like mine. The skyline stared back at me like a kingdom I'd built with blood and grit. But beneath the concrete and glass, something was cracking, and I was about to find out just how deep the fault line ran. I'm Dominic Russo, South Boston-born, son of a janitor, raised by a man who knew more about Greece than politics, and a mother who cleaned the offices of men who wouldn't look her in the eye. By the time I was 28, I'd bulldozed my way into Boston real estate like a wrecking ball. No Ivy League degree, no trust fund. Just vision, rage, and relentless hours. That's what it took to earn a seat at the Montgomery table. That, and marrying their daughter, Vanessa. God, I thought she was the prize. Elegant, brilliant, the kind of woman who walked into a boardroom and made it hers without raising her voice. For a while, she made me believe I belonged in her world. Her father didn't agree. Howard Montgomery called me ambitious, which was code for "you'll never be one of us." But he couldn't deny results. My strategy rebuilt the waterfront. I gave their sinking empire buoyancy. Still, 6 years into our marriage, something had shifted. The warmth between us had cooled into calculated distance. I started keeping a mental tally of her foundation meetings. Too many, too frequent, and never on the calendar. That morning, I was standing by my office window, coffee in hand, watching the cranes move steel into place at Harbor Point, the centerpiece of our next expansion. The city hummed like a living organism, and somewhere beneath that noise, something whispered, "She's hiding something." My intercom buzzed. "Mr. Russo, your wife is on line 1. I didn't answer right away. My jaw tensed. I knew the call wouldn't be pleasant. It hadn't been for months. "Put her through." Vanessa's voice came in smooth, crisp, like chilled champagne. "Dominic, the Prescotts canceled dinner. Again. I told you involving your brother-in-law in Harbor Point would complicate things. We needed Raymond on the deal," I said, keeping my tone level. "The board trusts him and the Prescotts will come around." There was a pause, one she used when she wanted me to feel stupid. "You remember whose idea it was to bring you into the fold, right?" She didn't need to say more. Her father never believed I belonged. That only changed when I saved their family business with my harborfront development plan. "I'll be late tonight," she added. "Foundation meeting, don't wait up." Click. I stared at the receiver. No "I love you," no "talk later," just cold dismissal. That was the 3rd foundation meeting this month. And as far as I could tell, the foundation had no events scheduled. I opened my calendar. Empty. Then the door opened without a knock. Only one man could get away with that. Anthony Kowalski, my head of security, and the only person left who remembered the real me. We'd met in St. Mary's Home for Boys. He once broke a chair over a foster dad's back for hitting me with a belt. We've been brothers ever since. "Your brother-in-law's here," he said. "Wants to talk numbers." Raymond, Anthony, gave me a look, the kind that said, "Be careful." Raymond strolled in like he owned the place. In some ways, he did. Vanessa's younger brother, co-partner in Russo Montgomery Developments, and the Montgomery family's golden boy. Good looks, effortless charm, and that smile investors ate up like candy. Dom, just the man I wanted to see. He dropped a folder on my desk. North Shore projections. Beck revised them. I opened the folder. The numbers were off. Nelson's report last week was much more conservative. "Nelson's playing it safe," Raymond said, loosening his tie. Beck ran new numbers. Aggressive. But with the Taiwanese investors, we can afford to push. Taiwanese investors? I set the papers down slowly. "Since when?" Raymond smirked. "Board approved last month. You were in Chicago." Another deal. Another decision made without me. A pattern was forming. "I'll review it," I said evenly. "We'll talk tomorrow." Raymond gave me that half-shrug, half-smile he used to end conversations on his terms and walked out. Anthony closed. The door behind him. He's playing you, he muttered. And your wife's helping. I didn't answer. I already knew. That night I met with Natalia Vega. We go back too, not as far as Anthony, but far enough. Former FBI cybercrimes, sharp, discreet, dangerous when necessary. She'd cleaned out cartel networks before breakfast and helped me quietly fix problems no press ever caught wind of. Your text sounded urgent, she said, sliding into the booth at Marcel's. I need eyes on two people. Vanessa, Raymond, discreet surveillance, texts, calls, GPS if you can swing it. Natalia raised an eyebrow. Business or bedroom? I need to know which. She slid the USB drive I gave her into her coat pocket. Dom, you sure you want the truth? Always, she nodded. Then they better hope there's nothing to find. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people closest to you, stick around, because this isn't just a story of revenge. It's the anatomy of betrayal, American style. 3 days later, the results came in. Nothing explicit, no love notes, no incriminating photos, but plenty of missing messages, deleted chains, late-night calls, GPS data showing Vanessa and Raymond at the same location, twice when they claimed to be on opposite sides of the city. Even more disturbing, Raymond's emails with board members, his tone, the language, he was positioning himself to replace me. I sat in my car staring at the screen, the evidence making my knuckles white against the steering wheel. It wasn't the affair that crushed me. It was the betrayal, the coordination, the precision. This wasn't a falling out. It was a coup. They weren't just cheating on me. They were cutting me out of everything I'd built. And that's when I knew this wouldn't end in court. It would end with fire. They say betrayal doesn't happen by enemies. It happens by the ones you let closest. And that week, I stopped sleeping. I stopped pretending. I stopped playing nice. The file Natalia delivered sat on my desk for hours before I opened it again. At first glance, it was surgical, no photos, no sexts. But the deletion patterns, overlapping GPS locations, late-night calls that didn't show up on either's calendar, they were breadcrumbs leading to a truth neither of them dared say out loud. Raymond and Vanessa were more than co-conspirators. They were co-architects. They'd been slowly removing me from the structure I'd built from scratch, like termites hollowing out a beam you don't realize is compromised until the ceiling collapses. That evening, I drove home to Beacon Hill but didn't go inside. Just watched from the car as the lights flickered through the front windows. Vanessa was already home. She was moving around the kitchen. From the outside, we looked like a couple with everything. Stone facade, black iron railings, a classic Boston address. But inside it was just smoke and mirrors. We hadn't had dinner together in over 3 weeks. I stopped asking why. I called Anthony. I need a favor. Quiet. You want eyes on your house? No. I want full surveillance on Raymond. Phones, email, even burner activity. And check offshore transfers, especially under the foundation name. Got it. And Anthony. I think she's gonna run. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. The next morning, I walked into the office and saw something that nearly made me laugh. Raymond in the boardroom, sitting at the head of the table. My seat. He was pitching to the senior partners, including Nelson, our most conservative director. It was about Harbor Point Phase 2, and he was using projections I'd already flagged as reckless. But they lapped it up. He had a way with words. He always had. But that wasn't what got me. It was the way Vanessa's name came up mid-pitch, like she'd co-authored the strategy. They'd made her part of the plan. While cutting me out of it, I walked in without knocking. Hope I'm not interrupting, I said. The room went silent. Raymond smiled, but his eyes said otherwise. Dom, just walking the team through the updated timeline. I see. These projections look familiar. Didn't Beck pull them after I rejected them last quarter? Raymond leaned back. Beck revisited them after the Taiwanese group expressed renewed interest. We figured now was the right time. We. That. One word burned like acid. Vanessa had no operational title. She hadn't since year 3. She was supposed to be off the business side. Yet here she was, embedded like a silent partner in every major decision being made behind my back. After the meeting, I cornered Nelson outside the elevator. Let me guess. Raymond said I was too risk-averse. He hesitated. He said you were focusing on legacy projects and not aggressive enough to meet investor expectations. Legacy. Like I was some old man past his prime. I built this company while Raymond was still asking his trust fund manager for lunch money. Now he was spinning me as the guy slowing the machine. I knew what came next, a whisper campaign to the board. A timed vote. Then the PR statement about leadership realignment or some other corporate euphemism for a knife in the back. I wouldn't wait for that knife. That night I had dinner with Natalia again. Same booth, same wine, very different tone. You? We're right, I told her. They're cutting me out of my own company, and they're doing it fast. She slid a phone across the table. That's Raymond's burner. Intercepted texts show regular communication with a private intelligence group, possibly hired muscle or asset recovery. He's gearing up for something bigger than a corporate takeover. Define bigger. International money laundering. He's moving company funds through Taiwanese shell groups that connect to 3 flagged entities, all connected to Harbor Point. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, they're going to use my project as a shell for something illegal. That's my guess, she said. And once the feds come knocking, guess who they'll think was running it? I nodded. Me. It was brilliant in a way. Position me as the architect of a deal that implodes in federal investigation. Use it as cause to remove me. Then sweep in and salvage the company under Montgomery control. But I didn't build my life by being outmaneuvered. The next morning I paid a visit to Franco, my father, or at least the man who raised me. He ran an auto shop in South Boston that doubled as a private chess club for people who didn't play by rules. I hadn't stepped foot in there for years. Not since I went legit. He wasn't surprised to see me. What did they take from you? He asked, without looking up from the carburetor. My company, I said. My wife. And maybe my freedom, if I don't act fast. He wiped his hands. So what do you need? Information. On Howard, from the old days. Specifically his land deals in the 90s. Anything sketchy? Franco tilted his head. You're planning to burn him. No, I'm planning to collapse. The whole damn house. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a dusty manila envelope, and slapped it on the workbench. Start with this, and if you want more, you'll need to talk to Finnegan. Finnegan? He did time for a warehouse fire. 2 homeless guys died in it. Right after, Howard bought that lot for pennies on the dollar. My guess? That fire was a favor. That night, I drove to Quincy. The nursing home was quiet. I brought 2 bottles of scotch and a promise of better care. Finnegan talked for 2 hours, and what he gave me was pure gold. Letters, tape recordings, even a handwritten note from Howard about timing the incident for best insurance value. All of it buried in a safety deposit box held by Finnegan's daughter, a nurse, Maggie Walsh. By noon the next day, I had the access code. By 3 p.m., I was holding a tape where Howard Montgomery all but admitted to felony arson. That's when I knew. This wasn't going to be a legal battle. This was going to be war, and I had the first missile in my hand. There's a moment when you realize the people you thought were family were just shadows in your way. Not only had Vanessa and Raymond betrayed me, they'd tried to replace me before my hands even left the wheel. But I had something they didn't. I had history. I had secrets. And now, I had fire. After collecting the tapes and the letters, I didn't sleep for 36 hours. My apartment turned into a war room. Every square foot was covered with old blueprints, transcripts, financial printouts, and a digital board of connections. What started as personal betrayal was now a federal offense waiting to be exposed. Raymond had been siphoning project funds through off-book Taiwanese entities. Harbor Point wasn't a condo dream anymore, it was a front. And every time I read more of Howard's letters, I realized the rot went back decades. Natalia brought me the blueprints first. She hacked Raymond's secure server. At first glance, they looked like modified building plans for a luxury complex. But once you peeled back the labels, you saw something else. Reinforced walls, narrow hallways, soundproof holding cells, no windows, and only one concealed loading dock with direct harbor access. It wasn't just a building, it was a secure facility hiding in plain sight. "You're not just being cut out of your company," Natalia told me. "You're being set up as the architect of an illegal intelligence operation." I stared at the redlined blueprints. "He's laundering money and preparing a base for something else." "Arms," she guessed. "Or worse," I said. "Raymond wasn't just greedy, he was reckless, and he was counting on my silence while he sold our company's integrity to foreign buyers. He probably thought I'd walk away quietly. Maybe he thought I'd self-destruct under the weight of the scandal, but I wasn't going anywhere. And I wasn't going quietly. Anthony arranged the rest. We had access to the Harbor Point construction site through his security firm. On paper, I was still an active partner, though they'd done everything to freeze me out. That night, we pulled the trigger, 11:17 p.m. to be exact. Anthony's men had swapped out the night shift with friendlies. The site was nearly deserted. The only ones present were Raymond and his VIP guest from Taiwan. I watched them, from across the street in an abandoned building, binoculars in one hand, a trigger device in the other. Natalia sat beside me monitoring directional microphones. "Got audio," she said. "Raymond's talking. He was walking Xiao, his investor, through the site, selling him a future they would never see. I assure you, Mr. Xiao, the facility will meet every security requirement. Once operational, your people will have complete discretion." Xiao responded, in clipped English. "Our concern is the current instability. Russo's presence, the delay in approval." "Dominic is out," Raymond said. "Board votes tomorrow. We'll formalize it. He's already lost his standing. Any materials he collected won't be a problem. We're handling it." Natalia raised her eyebrows. "He thinks you've got nothing." I flipped the safety off the trigger and looked at the site one more time. The trailers, the material stacks, the gas lines they thought were secure. Anthony's crew had placed small ignition points, not bombs, not enough to collapse anything structural, but enough to create a scene. Smoke, chaos, noise, cameras. "Showtime," I said. I pressed the button. From across the street, you could see it in layers. First, a flash, then a shudder, then the plumes of fire curling into the sky like fingers grabbing at air. Lumber caught first, then the tarp stacks, then the barrels. Within 60 seconds, the alarms blared, and emergency responders were on their way. Within 90 seconds, Raymond and Xiao stumbled out of the trailer, coughing and shouting, caught directly on security cameras. Exactly as planned. We didn't need to destroy the building. We just needed the world to see who was inside it, when they weren't supposed to be. Natalia packed up fast. "They'll figure it was intentional." "They'll be right," I said. The next morning I showed up at the board meeting uninvited. I wore my best charcoal suit, not for them, for the press that would eventually write about what happened. The room went silent the second I walked in. Raymond was already there, tie undone, face pale. He hadn't slept. "What are you doing here?" he barked. "Good morning to you too, partner. You're no longer part of this company." "Actually," I said, placing a legal folder on the table, "you'll find my removal hasn't been formally ratified, and given the events of last night, I'd say my presence is now crucial." Howard Montgomery was at the head of the table. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked annoyed, like I'd showed up late to dinner and embarrassed the help. "This is highly irregular, Dominic." "No. What's irregular is a foreign investor walking through a restricted construction zone in the middle of the night with no security clearance, while one of your board members escorts him through an illegal annex." I plugged a USB into the AM projector and brought up images. First was Raymond and Xiao entering the site, then blueprints of the hidden facility, then Xiao's diplomatic passport. Finally, a list of his known affiliations with international intelligence groups. "This," I said, "is what you've been funding." Raymond stood knocking over his chair. "You set me up, you started that fire. I shrugged. I reported suspicious activity at a site I legally own, fire marshals determining the cause. But I'm more concerned about what they'll find in the walls. Howard was stone still. What do you want? He asked. Simple, I said. Raymond's resignation. Immediate. Full control of Harbor Point returned to me. In return, I keep this situation between us and the authorities already investigating this man's visa activity. And I don't mention the payments to Taiwanese entities you quietly authorized last quarter. This is blackmail, Raymond said through clenched teeth. This is business, I replied. And unlike you, I'm offering you a way out. Howard tapped the table slowly, then nodded. We'll discuss this in executive session. Of course, I said. Just know that outside this room, the world is already asking questions. They left. Raymond stayed behind. You think you've won? Vanessa's filing divorce papers. You'll lose half of everything. I smiled. Interesting timing. Right when you needed me out of the way. You're finished, he said. I didn't answer, because at that moment, both our phones buzzed. Raymond looked down, and his face dropped. Dozens of alerts, news headlines, stock plunges, media inquiries. Because while the building had burned, I'd released something else, to select reporters, to key investors, to federal contacts, a bundle of scanned letters, financial records, photos of Howard Montgomery's arson cover-up from the 90s, and a memo titled Legacy of Fire with my name nowhere on it. Raymond looked up at me with panic in his voice. What did you do? I let the truth in. Security entered the room, Anthony among them. Problem here, Mr. Russo? I adjusted my jacket. No problem. Mr. Montgomery was just leaving. I always thought I knew where I came from. South Boston, son of a janitor and a housekeeper, raised in cracked hallways and under flickering lights. I wore my background like armor. Every handshake, every deal, every brick I laid in this city was a middle finger to people like Howard Montgomery. But then everything I believed cracked in half with one piece of paper. The birth certificate was tucked inside a hollowed-out construction manual we recovered from the hidden chamber at Harbor Point. We'd returned after the fire with a federal inspection team. Just routine, they said. But I knew better. That building still had secrets, and we found them. Inside the sealed room were surveillance photos, maps, building schematics, and a wall of timelines. It started 5 years ago. 2 years before I married Vanessa. They had photos of me with city officials, diagrams of my home, my office, even my father's auto shop, security system layouts, vulnerabilities, notes about my daily schedule, a kill plan if needed. They weren't just planning to cut me out of the company, they were preparing to erase me, and at the center of it all, the document, my birth certificate. Dominic Vincent Russo, born in South Boston. Mother, Maria Russo. Father, Howard Francis Montgomery. I stared at the name until the words blurred. Anthony read it over my shoulder and stepped back like the paper had caught fire. This has to be fake, he said. It's a setup, meant to destabilize you. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then I remembered the quiet scholarships that appeared when I was in high school. The anonymous donor who paid for my architecture degree. The way Howard Montgomery had suddenly accepted my courtship with Vanessa after years of hostility. I thought it was because I'd proved myself. No, he knew. He always knew. That night I drove to Southie. My father was in the garage, sleeves rolled up, hands black with grease. The old place smelled like oil and cigarette ash and the ghosts of 100 buried stories. You knew, I said as soon as I stepped in. He didn't look surprised. Didn't even stop working. Where did you find it? Harbor Point. Hidden with surveillance files. They've been watching me my whole life. He wiped his hands on a rag, then finally turned toward me. His eyes were the same eyes that stared back at me in the mirror every morning. Your mother swore she'd take that secret to the grave. I honored that. So it's true. He nodded once. Not defensive, not ashamed. Just tired. She worked for the Montgomerys when she came over from Naples. Howard took advantage, got her pregnant. Paid her to disappear. I married her anyway, loved her anyway, raised you like my own. Because you were. I sat down on an overturned milk crate. My legs suddenly felt like glass. And Vanessa? Was born years later to Howard and his wife. You two share blood, half-siblings. I clenched my fists. You let me marry her. I tried to stop it. Without telling you. Without ruining your world. But you were in love. Or thought you were. I figured maybe Howard had kept that secret too. Maybe. She didn't know either. My mouth felt dry, my skin burned. He knew, I'm sure of it now. That's why he allowed the marriage, that's why he backed me. He was controlling the bloodline, hiding the stain in plain sight. Franco lit a cigarette, with shaky hands. Howard's a monster, always has been. But I never wanted you to carry his poison. That's why I stayed silent. I need air. I stepped outside and leaned against the brick wall. The city noise buzzed in the distance, but everything felt muffled, like I'd been dropped underwater. All my life I'd been clawing to prove I was better than Howard Montgomery. And now I knew I was just his consequence, his accident, his legacy. Back at my penthouse, I poured a double shot of scotch and didn't touch it. My phone buzzed. A message from Natalia. Vanessa accessed a safety deposit box, and then met with a defense attorney, Wesley Palmer. She's preparing for a move. I stared at the screen. My wife, my sister, my betrayer, and still, part of me, wanted answers from her mouth, not from files, not from investigators. I wanted to hear it. Why? The next morning, I received a call from Detective Martinez. Her voice was tight. Dominic, we have a situation. What kind? Your name's come up in a new file. Anonymous drop. Accusations of financial manipulation, offshore accounts, falsified contracts, all linked to Harbor Point. My pulse spiked. Let me guess. Delivered by someone with perfect timing? Your wife. And your brother-in-law? They're trying to flip this whole thing on you. I laughed. It came out sharp. Almost amused. Of course they are. That's the Montgomery way. Set fire to the house. And hand the matchbook to the butler. Martinez paused. Are the allegations true? Only the parts I planned myself. The rest is fiction. I thought you should know. They're coming after your reputation now. Not just your company. Your freedom. I looked out at the skyline. My city. My name written in steel and stone. Then it's time I finish what I started. That night I returned to Franco's garage. He was waiting with a box of documents, old ledgers, property transfers, letters, the kind of paper trail that could sink the Montgomery dynasty forever. I kept this in case the day ever came, he said. The day when I had to choose between destroying them and protecting myself. He handed me a folder, labeled Maggie Walsh. The nurse? Her father was the fall guy for Howard's warehouse fire. He left her everything, letters, tapes, confessions. She wants justice. I opened the file and read the first page. It started with, Howard promised me protection. Instead, I got 10 years. By the time I finished, I knew exactly how to end this, with fire. But this time, the kind that leaves no one untouched. Not Raymond. Not Vanessa. And not the man whose blood flows in my veins. The funny thing about building an empire is how quickly it turns to glass when the foundation is made of lies. I thought fire would end this. That exposing the secret facility, the foreign, investors, and Raymond's betrayal would be enough. I was wrong. Because when you burn down a house like the Montgomerys, you don't just uncover secrets. You awaken ghosts. And dead men, it turns out, can still talk. It began with a knock at my door. Eleanor Chun, my attorney, sharp as razors, loyal to a fault. She wasn't supposed to be in the city, yet she stood in my doorway with a folder and a tremble in her hand I'd never seen before. Someone tried to grab me last night, she said, stepping inside. 3 men, professional, left a message I didn't need to ask. I already knew. Xiao, he wasn't just a shadow partner from overseas anymore. He was in this now, desperate to protect the asset I'd set on fire. Harbor Point was never just real estate to him. It was leverage. A secure transit hub for whatever illegal operations his people were planning. And now that it was burning, he wanted someone to blame. Someone to silence. That night, Natalia intercepted a communication from Raymond's private channel. A meeting. At the old South Harbor warehouse. The same place where my father once hauled crates in the dead of winter. The place where blood had once dried on the concrete floor after a debt went unpaid. The message was short. Bring the drive. Come alone. It was bait. I took it. I arrived at the warehouse 10 minutes early. No backup. No weapons. Just the flash drive in my coat pocket and a silent prayer to ghosts I no longer believed in. I stood under the rusted metal beams and listened to the echo of my own footsteps. Then she appeared. Vanessa, hair pulled back, face pale, eyes harder than I remembered. You came alone, she said, like it surprised her. You asked nicely, I replied. That's not your style. Neither is sending killers after attorneys. But here we are. She didn't flinch. You still don't get it, do you, Dominic? You think this is about money? About revenge? This is about legacy. My family's name was everything, and you, the janitor's son, the mistake my father made, you walked in and took it. I didn't take anything. I earned it. She laughed. The sound bounced off the metal walls like broken glass. You think building towers makes you powerful, but you were always a pawn. Howard knew who you were from the moment you shook his hand. He let you in because he thought he could control you, mold you into the version of himself he wished he'd been. And when you proved too smart to be bent, he sent Raymond, and you went along for the ride. I tried to protect what was left, my family, my future. You were the threat. Then why meet me here? Because it's done now, she said. Raymond's in custody. Howard's dying. You've burned everything, but you don't know about the switch. I froze. What switch? A dead man's switch. Raymond built it years ago. A timed release of documents, recordings, files that implicate half the city, politicians, judges, bankers. If the system doesn't get a deactivation code within 48 hours, it all goes public. And you're telling me this because you want to stop it. Because once it goes off, you'll go down with them. She pulled a small device from her coat, a flash drive, identical to mine, but encrypted. Raymond's fail-safe, the insurance policy, he designed for the endgame. And what do you want in exchange? Let me walk away. I give you the code, you stop the leak, and we both disappear. I stepped closer. After everything, after the lies, the betrayal, the blood you spilled, you think I'll let you vanish with a clean slate? No one gets a clean slate. I just want a chance to survive. A slow silence stretched between us. Then I took the flash drive. You're not walking away, but you might get a head start. Behind me, the warehouse doors creaked open. Anthony stepped in with 2 men, not cops, not suits, just old friends from another life. The kind who did favors without asking questions. Vanessa turned pale. You lied. You said you came alone. I did, but I never said I'd leave alone. She tried to run. Anthony blocked the way. What do we do with her? He asked. Let her go. Let her run. She's already destroyed herself. Back at the penthouse, I plugged in the flash drive. Natalia cracked the code in under an hour. What we found inside made my skin crawl. Lists of names, transaction logs, surveillance footage, audio files of Howard speaking plainly about arsons, bribes, deals made under the table and paid in silence. But what shocked me most was the folder marked Dominic. Inside were letters, not about me, to me. Howard had written them. Dozens, unsent, unread, tracing years. Pages filled with the regret of a man who never knew how to love a son he was too ashamed to claim. He talked about watching me rise. About the moment he realized I would never be controllable. About the fear he felt when he saw himself in my eyes and didn't like what stared back. He wrote that he was sorry and I didn't care. The next day I met with the federal prosecutor. I handed over everything, the files, the audio, the full layout of Harbor Point's hidden rooms, and I told them where to find Raymond's backups, where to look for the money, the connections, the back doors. The case would take years, but the dynasty was over. Howard Montgomery died 2 days later, alone in a hospital bed. No visitors, no legacy. Raymond stayed silent in prison, Facing decades. Vanessa disappeared. Rumors said she was in Greece. Others said Dubai. I never checked, and I changed the name on the company. Russo Developments. No hyphens, no double surnames. Just the name I was given by the man who raised me, and then I started building again. But not towers. I created a foundation. One that paid tuition for janitors' kids, cleaners' kids, people like my mother, people like Franco. The first scholarship I gave out was named after her, Maria Russo. I stood on stage that day in a modest auditorium and looked into the eyes of a kid who reminded me of myself at 15. Angry, determined, chasing something he couldn't yet name, and I told him this. You don't get to choose where you come from, but you damn well get to choose where you go next. That night, back at my penthouse, I poured one final glass of scotch, not to celebrate, but to bury the past, because I'd survived the Montgomery fire, and all that was left now was smoke and steel. Boston was quieter now, or maybe it was just me who finally stopped listening for footsteps behind every deal for betrayal, behind every smile. The war was over. Not the kind you see in headlines, but the kind that burns in boardrooms and family dinners, the kind that ends with names erased and buildings renamed. Russo Development stood tall where the Montgomery name once dominated every corner of downtown. I didn't hold a press conference or pop champagne. I walked into the same office I'd been pushed out of and put my name on the glass. No fanfare, just silence and fresh air. I didn't rebuild Harbor Point right away. I let it sit in ruin, for a while, like a scar that needs to breathe before it heals. People asked why, and I said because wounds need time. They didn't understand. They weren't supposed to. Franco moved into a small house outside the city. He retired for real this time. Still made coffee like it was 1982. Still read the paper with a scowl like it had wronged him personally. We didn't talk about Howard, or Vanessa, or bloodlines. We talked about the Red Sox and the price of tires and whether I was finally dating someone who didn't lie for a living. I wasn't, and he knew it. Natalia took a contract with Homeland Security, said she missed the rush. Before she left, she gave me a box of documents marked Final Phase. Inside was every trace of the Montgomery operation scrubbed and buried, her final gift. I never opened it. Sometimes closure is not knowing. I saw Vanessa one more time, or maybe I imagined it. I was walking through Central Park during a trip to New York. She was sitting on a bench wearing dark glasses with a paperback in her hand. No security, no lawyers, just her. We locked eyes. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us waved. She didn't move. I kept walking. That was the last page of our story. No words, just silence. She'd gotten what she wanted, and so had I. The rest was dust. The city remembered me differently now. Not as the son of a janitor, not as the man who married his way into power, but as the one who tore down a dynasty with nothing but truth and timing. I wasn't proud of everything I'd done, but I didn't regret it either. Sometimes survival doesn't come with clean hands. Sometimes justice looks like revenge with better lighting. The Maria Russo Foundation awarded its first batch of scholarships that spring. 42 students from working-class families. Kids who'd never seen the inside of a boardroom but could outwork every silver spoon brat in the state. I sat in the back row and watched them shake hands with politicians who wouldn't have looked at them twice a year ago. And I smiled, not because I'd won, but because they might, because I'd broken something to give them a path through. A reporter asked me once what legacy meant to me. I said legacy is what's left when the fire goes out. If it's only ash, then you did it wrong. If it's steel and roots and something that grows beyond your name, then maybe you built something that matters. I kept my office small. No more corner suites, no more marble floors, just a steel desk and a window that looked toward the harbor. The one they tried to sell to spies. The one I took back. Anthony still worked security. Said he preferred punching bad guys over reviewing blueprints. He kept my calendar light and my circle tighter than ever. We didn't talk about the night at the warehouse, about Vanessa, about the flash drive that almost blew up half the city's elite. We didn't need to. I still had the letter. The one Howard wrote to me. The only one that mattered. It wasn't an apology. Just a final confession. A man who knew his end was coming and tried to scratch something real into paper before it was too late. I never framed it. I kept it in a drawer. Some things aren't meant to be displayed. Just remembered. I visited his grave once. No headstone. Just a brass plate with a name and 2 dates. I stood there for 10 minutes. Said nothing. Then walked away. You don't owe ghosts anything. Not even goodbye. As for Raymond, he pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. 23 years in federal custody. No parole. No visitors. He sent me a letter once. I didn't read it. I donated it to the foundation's shred pile. Some nights I still wake up before sunrise. Sit by the window. Watch the lights flicker across the water. I think about the boy I used to be. Angry. Broke. Starving for a seat at a table that didn't want me. And I realize I don't want that table anymore. I built a new one. Different shape. Different rules. One where janitors, kids, and street-smart girls and truth-tellers get a seat without begging. If you're listening to this, if you made it this far, then maybe you're like I was. Cut out. Pushed down. Told you're not enough. Let me say this plainly. You don't need their invitation. You don't need their last name. What you need is a spine, a plan, and the fire to carry it through. Because once you know your worth, no one can sell you short again. This story wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what they tried to bury. About burning down the lie so the truth could finally breathe. It was about building legacy with your own hands and walking away when the dust settles, still standing still whole. If this story hit you, if it reminded you of something you lost or something you're fighting to get back, then stay with us. Subscribe to the channel, because every week we share stories of power, betrayal, resilience, and redemption. Stories like yours. Stories that remind you it's never too late to rebuild from the rubble. My name is Dominic Russo, and I didn't inherit a legacy. I forged it. Now it's your turn. Subscribe. Watch. Remember who you are.